Hi everyone, welcome back to Creative Mornings Milan events. I am very happy to welcome to this episode of our online edition Francesca, Donatella and Valentina. Francesca and Donatella, you will be able to know them better in a while. Valentina is the host of Creative Mornings Bologna, and as usual she's a friend of ours, and this event is in collaboration with them. So, ciao Valentina, thanks for being here as usual. Let's start with the theme of July. Today we are speaking about home. So the theme was chosen by Kansas City and illustrated by Alison Carrick-Williams, that you can find on Instagram very easily by her name, and you can appreciate her work, which is really interesting in my opinion. I'm starting as usual with a great thank you to our international sponsor, MailChimp, that is also funding for new generation of Black business founders. So thank you, MailChimp. And to Skillshare, that as usual gives us a lot of inspiration and possibilities to learn something new. This time, I'm really happy to welcome our first sponsor for the Milano community, which is SwapFits. And in a while, I will show you what they are going to do for the world, for the environment, for the city of Milan, and for our community too.
Bike is not for sale. At SwapFits, we don't sell bikes. We believe this planet has enough stuff. Why do we buy and buy and buy just to throw it all away? How about we stop owning things and start using things? Things designed to be reused. That's why you can't buy our bikes. And you don't need to share one either. We give you a high-quality bike. It's yours. And it's our job to keep you moving. Our generation, we have a choice. Let's consume less and enjoy more. So this is not just a bike ad. This is an invitation. Because you can't stop us, but you can join. SwapFits, the bike membership.
So in short, in a couple of days and a couple of weeks, we will be able to understand what the collaboration with SwapFits will be for us. But for now, thank you for being with us and for being our first sponsor of this new way to do Creative Mornings in Milano. So back to our speakers and to our team. Creative Mornings, as you know, is an international community. We are more than 200 cities in the world with almost 10,000 talks online, with so many attendees and millions of video views. I want to thank you, the Milano team, which is growing and growing in these days. So thanks everyone for being here, especially to Rais, Michele, Paola, Nicola and Elena, who are the ones more involved in the online edition. I have to thank the Bologna community too, of course, in the form of Valentina, who is here with us, but also all the other members of the team. Just some reminder of what Creative Mornings is as a community. We believe in creativity. We believe that creative life requires bravery and action. So the creativity is not just a matter of idea, it's a matter of doing something in our world, trying to make new connection, learning, finding new ways to be connected. One example of this is, of course, the collaboration between Milano and Bologna, which was born during a very difficult time for our community, and the presence of Donatella Caggiano too, because she has been with us as a speaker already, and she also helped us out with creative ideas during the pandemics. And she's also a fan of Francesca, So the connection that comes from Milano to Bologna to Donatella and to Francesca is something really amazing in my opinion, and this is exactly what Creative Mornings is about. Everyone is welcome. Welcome again to this event. You can share your thoughts or have comments or ask questions in the chat. If you're looking at the YouTube channel, you can find the chat on the right, if I remember correctly. But I'm sure you can find it anyway. And here we are. So, what's the theme of today? The theme is home. So, what is home? Is home a place? Is something that can come with us? Usually we think about home as something that is, the house where you're born in, or the family you were born in. So something that somehow comes from the past, that has something to do with our origins. But that's not necessarily what it has to be, because home can be a direction, so a direction of return, the direction that comes from the idea for a project, the promise to create something, the idea to create something, of coming up with something that translates ideas into the space we live in. So home can have something to do with the future too, not just the past. So what does it mean? That building a home is a matter of design. The act of being, of building, of making a home, making a place, creating a space. Because home basically is where your ideas are safe to grow. And to reflect on this, we invited two very different speakers. They are both involved in different aspects of design, so different vocation to design. So welcome again to Francesca Perani and Donatella Caggiano.
Thank you.
So what about Francesca? Francesca Perani is an architect activist. She's a visual designer. She's an educator too. She graduated in architecture from Polytechnic of Milano, but trained also in Belgium, Australia, and UK. Her work ranges from interior architecture to interactive design, from illustration to set design. And she focuses on experimentation with material and visual. And she tries to charge emotionally and from a communicative point of view, her expressions in spaces, objects, and multimedia. She is also the founder of Cutout Mix, which is a platform delivering diverse silhouettes for the creative industry. And she's also the founder of Rebel Architette, which is an association advocating for the equality in architecture. You will be able to find all the links of her project in the newsletter that you have received, or at the end of this presentation, or on our social network, of course. Donatella is a communication expert. She's what we can say a human-centric strategy designer. She's a facilitator, and her works focuses on helping brands, organization, and community design a sense of belonging, especially while in transition. And then we will understand what this exactly means. She's the creator and host of the Design of Return podcast. And she will tell us something about this today. It's a bilingual podcast exploring the different meanings of home for the in-betweeners. And we will delve a bit in this concept too. She's also have a very interesting monthly newsletter, The Atlas, where she writes about these themes, so placemaking and cultural geography. Also, in this case, you will find all the links at the end of the presentation on the social networks and on the newsletter. So I hope that this talk will give you all some material to develop your own idea of home. So let's start with Francesca and give you your play.
Okay, I will share my screen.
Remove myself.
Can you see my screen? Can you see me?
Yes, we can, but we have lost Maria Chiara. she's not with us anymore.
Eccomi.
Now she's back.
Sorry.
So can I start now? Yes?
Of course.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. I'm a big fan of Creative Mornings and Tina Roth since many years. So I'm really, really happy to be here with you. And thank you to Maria Chiara for inviting me, and for Donatella as a big fan. I'm now a big fan of you as well. So thanks a lot. Today I'm gonna talk about the way I deliver homes when I design. So I'll shortly introduce myself. I'm a designer. I live in the north of Italy, in Bergamo, close to the mountains, where I really enjoy living. This is my studio, and I've been working for myself since 2007. And this is a very minuscule studio, but thanks to the great collaborators I had and some colleagues I've been working with, it's small in size, but broad in its scope, or at least I try to. I've been involved in architecture as a trained architect, but again, I was also interested in interior design work and set design. And at the same time, I also enjoy illustration and graphic design. So I believe what I try to deliver is graphic architecture, where visual research and spatial quality have the same importance to me. And this I can see more and more the more I proceed. So less building work and more visual research, I guess. And this you can see either in building design work, architecture work, as well as interior design work. Today, I'm gonna show you what I believe is what it really gives the quality of creating a home. So I start with considering home a place where you can find comfort, privacy, but also loving relationship. And this is definitely due to the privilege I have had, that was living in a beautiful house. That is this one that you can see here. It was a big house, but not just big. It was a house done by an architect engineer that was called Armel Manoukian. And so the beauty of this space was that he really created a sculptural space where we could live in. And I could always believe that the reason architects exist is because they have to always create artistic spaces that can lead to a very happy life. So this has been always my perception. Another influence to my design was definitely the summer times that we spent in our motorhome. So we were a big family, 6 of us, but we were really enjoying life also in this very little motorhome that was anyway so well designed that could really be a wonderful experience, not only for the summer, but it could also help me understanding that beauty, no matter the size, can be achieved anywhere. So home meant having a happy life, and beauty of unique customized spaces was the way we could achieve this happy life. And this is something I try to transfer to the client that asked me to renovate their spaces. So how do I find this uniqueness in home design? Well, I can admit that obviously after having resolved the functional aspects of the space, I'm very much into the emotional aspects. So I really would like that the space can be emotional and involved in, and this is something I try to achieve with all my design. Something else that I normally do is I always think that we are very used to live in boxes like this. Normally we live in boxes that comes from a rectangular or a square plan. But instead, what I'm very inspired of, or what I was very inspired of since my younger ages, were spaces that could be more fluid, like this one. And so I always wonder why, as architect, we are still pushing on to rectangular spaces and boxes, and we don't push the dimension into this. So ideally, this is something that I would like to call home, something rough, maybe something very texturized, and at the same time so far away from the boxes we live in. So I call myself an anti-box believer, and I really try to achieve this anti-boxing through different tools that I use. The first thing that I do with the space that I'm dealing with, and normally they are restoration, is I take the space, then I make it into volume, and then I divide it into many layers. When I found these many layers, I start twisting the angles. And this is my first way to break this box. And I found that diagonal lines help me giving the space a different dynamics. So we interact with the diagonal in a different way than we interact with the straight wall. So I do it with furniture. It can be also finishing, like a door like this one that was actually on a diagonal because of the diagonal ceiling that is behind it, but I really enjoyed doing it, as well as this terrace that is a triangular shape. Here you also already saw that when I cannot use the diagonal or together with the diagonal, I often use holes and drillings. Why I do that? I was very inspired by the first building sites I was involved in. It was my very, very first one. And I was taken by this picture and by the fact that it looked so easy to go through a wall, a concrete wall, with this drilling. So this is how I started using it together. So I started in a very functional way. In this case, you see a desk where I just made the holes so that the heat could go through from the heater to the rest of the room. But then I used it as windows, big windows, and then as small windows as well. So I found also the drillings a way to break the box. Together with diagonals and drillings and making circle windows, I'm also interested in creating unexpected textures. And normally the way I do it is also using materials that normally don't belong to the interior design world. So like using navy ropes like this as handles, as well as using spray insulation foam, not inside the wall where it normally sits, but outside as the cover of this facade. Or here, when I use the marble, but not using the flat area, but the crust, so the rocky area that normally we never use as basin. So this is the way I have seen in these years. I try to achieve beauty with breaking the rules, basically. And now I'm going to show you some of the projects I've been involved in, and it's a selection of the projects that I'm more affectionate to. This was one of the first one. It was in Turin, and it was a very small one, 38 square meters. And it was, as you can see, a very small plan with a huge pillar in the middle, not really in the middle. And I had to try and find a way to divide the day area from the night area that was sitting here. Here you see the toilet. So the way I acted here was to create two pieces of furniture that could make this division very clear. So I had a kitchen area with a very, very long top that was also becoming a sitting area and cabinets. And here I designed a bed that was also storage area here, and also couching, and was hiding also a wardrobe and a bookshelving. So the main idea was to use two pieces of furniture that could be on a dialogue through the usage of a very simple material, OSB, that is oriented strand board. That is a material we normally see on building sites, very, very cheap, and it uses recycled wood, and then stainless steel and laminated black. These few materials made the connection between the two areas of the loft. And you can see here, this is the couch, this is the sitting area, this is the book shelving, and here on the side we had the wardrobe. On this side, you can see the kitchen, where the texture of the material was really making the difference and creating one big area and furniture that we could be using as in many, many different ways. This is another house I'm really fond of, Roccolo House, designed with architect Sandra Marchesi, and I was getting bigger with the size, 75 square meter. Here you see it was a house in the forest. It was originally it was a tower house and hunting house, but then as you can see outside, it was built this extra piece of building and also this strange pagoda. And so the idea was to purify the forms and get them back to the original, not the original function, but the original architectural structure. So this is the way we found the space, a tower with 2 floors, very, very small, and then a big corridor here, a small corridor here, and a bigger room. So the only way we could act with this was not extending the walls, because it was not allowed. So the way we acted was to create these huge windows, and the windows could also allow to have not only a sitting, but also the opportunity to place beds in these 2 areas. So in the first floor, we allowed to have a kitchen and a lounge room, but also a potential bedroom here in the ground floor through this big window seating that you will see in a second. So architecturally, this is how we did it. So we extracted the window with this sort of box. But as you can see, the box inside were not boxes, but they had this diagonal that was smoothing the dimension of the seating. One other action that we took to integrate the building to the forest was also to provide this shading for thermal heat. And the shading was created with recycled timber panels that could really give privacy and also attention to the climate heat, given that it was all directed to the south. Here you see the material we were dealing with. The original tower was using stone and concrete. And then here you see the forest. What we did was to use very few material, again, quite economic. So we use plywood pine and concrete. And also we used the green, a very bright green, that was a reminder of the green that normally is used in these hunting towers, but restyled, let's say, in a contemporary, with a contemporary vibe. So here you see the interior and you see the seating area, also the bed area. And upstairs also the area that was a very small studio. Even here you see that the seating is also the balustrade. So we were really interested in designing everything customized, because so that the usage of the space could be multiple. Here you see the windows in the main lounge area. There is also the kitchen area and the bathroom as well. Here you see the usage of this circular windows. In this case, the idea was to recall the fact that when you were in these towers, hunting towers for birds, you were looking outside through very small openings. And so we did try to recall this looking out throughout these circle openings and windows. This is another project I want to show you. As you can see, I went to 240 square meters, and this is a project I did with Bloomscape Architecture, a studio I really like working with. We had a villa that was in 2 floors. So there was one main floor that was for one family and the top floor for another family. And the 2 floors were connected by this outside staircase. As you can see from the photos, you can see that the volumes were very strange and also very big. And most of all, this roof. So we tried to act to the house, trying to purify again the forms and the colors. Inside, as you can see here, it was a very beautiful 1970s house, very peculiar, and so we did our best also to keep some of the elements that for us were very rich and very intense, like the flooring and these high doors. One thing that really inspired us was this tiling that you see here. Very and this is something we use in order to give the same character to the house, even in a contemporary twist. So we divided the house in a different way. We removed the staircase that was here, and we left one small apartment to the mother of the client. While on the other side, you could go inside this new apartment. So the new apartment for the client was using the 2 floors, this small area of the ground floor, and then the top area completely. So what we did was to introduce a staircase in this space. Given that we took it off from here, we placed it here in the main room. And the fact that we placed it here made us shifting the position of the bathrooms. So you can see here the use of the diagonals in order to gain more space for the living room and what we call the piano room that is based here. Here you find a bedroom, and then here you find another bedroom, a walk-in wardrobe, and then the triangular terrace. In the entrance, we were going through this first room, and then we were seeing this big element that was the kitchen area. The kitchen area that was hosting also the main table. Here you can see the model that we created, the outside of the building that was also having some drillings to gain more light inside. And here the main piece, that was the staircase together with the kitchen top that was acting also as a seating and also as staircase itself. So you can see the building here where we use the recalling of this yellow, big openings, and also very light staircase that was covered with carpet. Here you can see the piano area and the bedrooms. As you can see, we kept some of the decoration and we restyled the doors inside, repainting them. The final project that I want to present you is one of my latest projects and is called the Urban Cabin. And it was the restoration of this area. There was a porch that only was used as a storage area for sport equipments like bicycles. And the request from the client was to convert it into a multi-usage residence that could be a guest house, a playroom, and also a workspace for the client. There were a couple with 2 kids, or it could also be a space for the kids when they grow up. So what I tried to do was to convert this area, keeping in mind that was set in a very dense urban situation. So the main key element to design it was to provide privacy. And as you can see, it was a strange area, very long corridor, 9 meters for 2.5 meters wide, and with big openings. One aspect that I forgot to tell you was that in this project, I had to also to consider the fact that the client origin, the father in the family had Persian origin, and while the mother was from Bergamo. So I tried to mix these 2 cultures in the design. I pick up the color that I was more fascinated with, that was the indigo blue, royal blue from Persia. And also, to give privacy, I got inspired by the shading that normally they use also for heat control. This was the mood board of the selected materials. Again, in this project, I used the OSB, Oriented Strand Board, because it was in such a small space. I wanted to give as much, I wanted really to enlarge the space with one only material that was not only white. And this texture is very nice because it gives you the impression to be in one whole space. And then I use metal grid for the exterior shading. Here you can see the plan, the entrance. And here you see how I develop it with a storage area in the entrance, a huge bench that was serving also as bed and also as storage area where you could also store the mattresses. The table, and then here you see a kitchen and the shower room. Here you can see that I've been using diagonals in order to place a seating that could help have conversation inside the house, given that in the middle we also had these columnettes. And here you can see the shading created outside that was also providing a mini garden. This is the model. And this is the shading that was also referring to ancient Persian arches. And this is the final work. This is the small garden. The shadings outside. They were also recalling texture that was already there. And this is the big sitting area that also serves as bedding. The window seating. And here you can see the kitchen, the small kitchen area with tiling as the kitchen top, and the blue shower room that you can see here. Also in this case, I tried to keep the memory of the previous wall that was this one, and I covered the whole area with blue, with resin, so that it could look bigger, and also at the same time, even if with quite sharp lines, it could also have character thanks to this memory of the wall that was existing before. So I hope I was in time, and I thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you very much, Francesca. So just a quick question before going to the second speech of tonight. That is from Lais, that first of all says that she would like to have a house built by you. The question is, she's not the only one, by the way. So the question is, what about the materials? So how do you choose the materials? So they are from the place you are building the house in. They are particularly technological or sustainable. You already told us that usually they are also recycled materials. So if you want.
Yes, I mean there is a big debate, and I can assure that it's a true debate. Sometimes, when you start doing a project like this, for instance, I wanted to use only natural materials, only materials that could be very sustainable, but at the same time, it's still very hard to have sustainable materials. Usable without spending too much in the transport. So when we talk about sustainable building, for instance, I believe that the last one you saw is sustainable because I look at restoring instead of removing the whole building and rebuilding it. There is something that it can be chosen. So I try always to maintain as much as possible what is already there. And at the same time, I try to use natural material and material that can last long as well. So in this moment, even if everybody wants to use sustainable material, we are still in a shifting moment where maybe getting the sustainable materials means paying very much for transportation. So we have to be very careful on trying to find the best solution for the location where you are set. So in the location I was set in to do the work, I always try to use local artisan and local materials as much as possible.
So that's also a way to be sustainable in a
Exactly.
different way, no? Okay,
Exactly.
Thank you very much. So thank you
you
for your presentation. We will come back all together for the final questions after Donatella's speech. So Donatella, your time.
Okay, thank you guys. Let me know if you see it.
I think so.
Do you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Great, thank you. So first of all, thank you very much to Maria Chiara and Creative Mornings. I'm really happy to be back here. I was here once last year, and it's not often that you find a creative community that gives you the opportunity to workshop an idea in its early stages. So I'm very grateful to be here because today I'm going to be talking about a project that's been in the works for 1.5 years, and it's been launched just a couple of months ago. I'm also very excited to be here with Francesca. You know, I love everything about your anti-box philosophy. It's very much a mindset I go about my life in general. We also have in common a little bit of the indigo blue here, but I remember when we connected to talk about and prepare this talk, you told me something that stayed with me, and it is that even when you designed homes that are supposed to be stable, you actually design them with a space in transit in mind. And I think that's very much the mindset that we're going into talking about this project today. We're now moving from designing the space around you with her work to designing kind of like the place inside you with this project. With space, I mean the physical surrounding. With place, we mean kind of like more of the intimate personal experience about it. So in particular, we, with this project, we designed for a community that never feels at home enough. So the theme of transit is actually very primal for them. So the project is called The Design of Return, and it is a bilingual podcast in English and in Italian. It features what we call personal stories of transit from the in-betweeners, who are people who live in between different cultures, different countries, different languages, different identities. And we explore what it means to find a place to call home. And it is right now a podcast who have the desire to become a platform. But at the beginning, it was a talk. And in particular, it was born here, Creative Morning Milan, the day in which I sat down and I started writing my story of how I came back home to Italy from the United States after 10 years abroad. And like many projects, the creative force behind it was solitude. I felt very much alone in my experience of unbelonging. I was in between two worlds, a cultural clash with a culture I've left, I was coming back to. I couldn't talk about it with my Italian friends. I had, problem talking about it with the friends that I left. And I also realized it wasn't the first time that I was having such an experience of unbelonging, because I am someone who has built home or learned to build home by separation. I've left many, many homes in my life to the point that I call myself a farewell expert. And every time I left one, I entered a little bit of a dilemma. So my first home that I left was my home in the South that I left when I was 7 years old because my parents moved to the North. And it started the debate inside me, like, am I from the South? Am I from the North? How do I answer the question, where am I from? Then I left my family home to go to college, and I applied to theater school the same day that I applied to business school. In Milan, they were also in the same street, and it started the eternal debate, am I a manager or am I an artist, that continued throughout my whole career, which ended up being in branding and communications for a larger corporation. The third home that I left was Italy when I became an expat, and I moved first to France in the United States, and I just added 2 more cultural to me being Italian. And in all that mix, I was trying to figure out which part of me is Italian, which part of me has borrowed from these other 2 homes. Then after 12 years of dating men, I ended up dating a woman and falling in love. And so exiting another home I knew too well, which was the home of heterosexual relationship. And this became another dilemma. Do I love women? Do I love men? And then I left that executive career as another home, and the United States. The initial debate of am I an artist or a manager matured into am I a storyteller, am I a storyteller, am I a marketer, am I a creator, until at some point I just left to come back home and kind of like lower the volume and paused a little bit all of the questions and really think about it. Took a couple of years, probably a year, a sabbatical year, and then going into that research. And I figured out that basically I was living in a world that either was built for me or that I built for myself as well in my head, in which what was asked of me all the time was to fit in. And what was asked less often was, how do I actually belong? And when you're constantly thinking about where do you fit in, you're constantly thinking about how do you design your home inside somebody else's house. Well, when you're asking yourself, where do I belong? You're kind of mature into the question of like, okay, what is that I actually call home? So for me, it was moving from a world that asked me to choose either or, like very specialized, to a world in which the only answer that I had to this question was, I am both. And now how do I figure out entering this new territory of both and, which is obviously more ambiguous and more confusing. Then I started thinking, what if my power was actually that I didn't fit in, that my power was that I could be the home everywhere. And what if unbelonging was my power then, right? And I found this word in my research, in-betweener, and I thought it could really represent that world, someone who carries many worlds inside of them, someone who cannot reduce whatever world they bring inside of them to one single story, but it's constantly juggling different countries, culture, languages, and identities. And then I started wondering, if we have that power, how can we use it? I was inspired by a talk from Dr. Vivian Ming, who is a neuroscientist and entrepreneur and author, which had a very interesting way of talking about purpose. She said that when you choose your life work, you should choose a problem to solve that will survive you, like a problem that you will not be able to solve even after you're dead, therefore puts you in a position as a creator, as someone that contributes to that problem, but not someone that owns the solution. And I found that very humbling. And I started asking myself that question, okay, what is the problem that I've been trying to solve all along? And no matter how much I twisted and turned and how much I drilled that wall, in Francesca's words, it always came down to belonging. And no matter if I was helping myself some other people, an organization, a brand. My only quest my entire life, I realized, was helping people find a place to call home, especially if in transit, which is one of the most unsettling territory. So return for me as an in-betweener was about, making that shift from home built by separation to home built by integration. And then I went on that stage in Creative Morning and just like talked to people. All I was really doing was asking others, what is your idea of return home? Is there anybody else out there with my own experience? And what I found out is in the room with me, where Italians who came back from abroad or foreigners who lived here for the first time, but there was also new mothers, people that have left an identity behind and were entering another home, motherhood, for example. There were people recovering from very bad car accidents and like managing the re-entry as their new self in their old world. And so this is where I started thinking, all right, maybe my personal story is more universal than I thought, and can it help other people? And so the idea of having a collective storytelling project like a podcast started being born over there. And so pandemic aside, we started research and production and creating a collective around this. And I discovered that one of the biggest problem when it comes to belonging is what I call the belonging freeze. So the idea that feeling like you don't belong is really an inhibitor to being an agent of change. And this happens all the time when our idea of space is too far away from our idea of place. Like when things like this happen, when you look around and nothing looks like you, or when there is a gap between your power and what your reality is giving you as a possibility to express it, or just simply when the outer world or the outer space doesn't reflect your inner world and your inner space. And this is when you feel disengaged. And feeling disengaged is paralyzing. And it makes it paralyzing because you're unable to take the next good step, both in life and in work, for you and for others. So we started asking ourselves, how can we help you build this engagement back? How can we help you build your place so then you can design your space? And so the podcast is really the first project in which we're setting ourselves up for bringing together the in-betweeners to master the art of, we call it placemaking. So that we can learn and we can practice and we can design belonging together, and we can do it for the kind of healthy future that we want to imagine, right? The healthy future that we want to imagine is non-binary, is sustainable, is generative. So really, we're interested in doing this with what's in our name. We want to give you wisdom, knowledge, experience, and action through the design of return, meaning the return is something that we approach and explore through personal story. Our interviews are always about the personal story of the guest. And we believe that through the personal story is the best way for us to explore the fact that a return really is not the end. It's actually more a constant redesigning of where you are and who you are. And very much like we were saying at the beginning, the origin, it doesn't have to be at the beginning of your path. The origin can be ahead of you every time you change after a transit. In fact, we actually created this sort of like, we imagined our logo and our symbol to be these like dots that wander around the journey, because it never really finds a fixed place, and it's okay. It's okay not to ever find a fixed place, and it's okay to deal with what it means to call something home when you are in that state. So design instead, in the design of return, represents that part of our work that explores return from the perspective of design, which means exploring return as a problem to solve, exploring return, designing the right question to do it, and exploring return from the perspective of service to the people that are involved. But because this is an audio project, I wanted to let you hear a little bit of how it all came together in the first trailer that we launched on June 8th. which was the first time in which we actually really declared how we're thinking about this, our mission, and give you a little bit of a preview of season 1. If Maria Chiara can help me.
How do you belong to a place you were not born in? And how do you come back home to a place you don't belong to anymore? I'm Donatella Caggiano, and I'm your host. A few years ago, after 10 years abroad, I quit a life as a globetrotting executive and came back home to Italy to redesign life and work, thinking I was really coming home this time. But I was wrong. The truth is, it wasn't the first time that I felt that way. I was 7 years old when I discovered the difference between a home and a house. My parents moved from a small village in the Italian south to the north, and I began my journey as what I call a farewell expert. Someone who would move many times a year between somewhere I loved to call home but had to say goodbye to, and somewhere I had to return to but never fit in. So much so that I spent most of my life living neither here nor there, and embodying that ancient narrative that the over there is always slightly more important than the over here. When after 3 years back in my homeland, I still felt like I didn't belong, I started questioning myself. And I discovered the journey had just begun again, and that between living and feeling at home, there is return. This is the Design of Return podcast, an Italian and English bilingual podcast about personal stories of transit as told by the in-betweeners, people who live in between different cultures, countries, languages, and identities.
So, 20, 30 years ago, students that were bilingual were punished, physically punished, emotionally punished for speaking their languages, their home languages. So we find ourselves in a context where there has been this constant effort to erase, to eradicate what made people be diverse.
La fluidità in realtà mi interessa, cioè quello di rompere le definizioni, le categorie e rimanere qualcosa in between è un lavoro che mi interessa e continuo a farlo.
When we go from the home life to homelessness, we are letting go of the first layer of suffering. And that's the sort of new home that we get, which is not necessarily a physical home per se, but the real home that we're creating for ourselves is inside.
E non mi sono mai affezionata alle porte, al bagno, al letto, ma mi sono affezionata alle cose che ho appiccicato ai muri. O anche semplicemente per una vacanza di 3 giorni mi porto dietro le fotografie e le devo appiccicare, no? Le devo vedere e devo sapere che posso sempre portarmela dietro questa casa.
You know, in every movie or book I grew up with, after the change, it has always been about the end of the journey. That moment you are cured, a return to a normality society defines for you. But this is rarely what happens. In life, there is not a moment when we figure it all out. It's more about a series of fractions and thresholds to assemble.
All of a sudden, instead of looking for a meaning for life, there was a sort of different question of how can you make every moment of your life meaningful.
It is in that rich wilderness of life in between the kingdoms, that floating, confusing state of unbelonging, when we try to figure out a place where the external world can reflect our internal world and return our many identities to ourselves, the true change might happen.
I feel like I'm from everywhere. I'm from everywhere that I've ever been. This is something that we all struggle with this idea of belonging, of feeling worthy, and of being able to connect with your home culture, but also with that receiving culture, right? With the foreign, let's say, culture that now feels to me like my own as well.
A return is not an arrival. It is just a constant redesign of staying. This transit time often goes unspoken, unexplored, and lasts way longer than the stories we tell. So here, we want to find a place for those stories, and then go and find the others. In the first season, I talked to
Grazie, and I'll let you listen to the rest of it. If you guys want, we'll send you all the link to it. I wanted to talk to you about what are actually the 5 pillars that create our home in this project, and how we designed what we are actually producing and putting into the world. So the first one is definitely listening, which it's not only meaning listening to the interviews to our guests, but it was a listening work that we did prior to launch. We created what we call listen and tell sessions. We interviewed members of our future community, in-betweeners in the world or internationally, about their journey of belonging, what they need the most during their journey of belonging, and what they could get from a project like this before even putting this into the world. And we learned many things. We learned that this community is definitely a community that feels a lot of solitude and loneliness while finding their own place in the world. It's a community that we learned, for example, many times we ask about belonging. A lot of people talk about belonging at work. So we cannot have to consider that into designing belonging in life and work, and very much connected in our culture. And we also find out that it is a community that's very interested in lifelong learning and a lot of resources. So this kind of determined everything else that we are designing. And the second principle is empathy, for sure. So empathy for us is fundamental, because in the story that we want to nurture, we do it so then everybody can learn to connect with someone else's feeling, even without the same life story. And on top of that, we want to feature a constellation of perspective around the theme of return that doesn't exclude anyone, that actually includes. There's a lot of inclusions of all the perspective, all the point of views. So, for example, we build a story system to guide us as a compass in the way we actually select stories for this first storytelling project. That's a podcast. And if you put Return Home at the center, for example, we want to feature stories of people that had the choice to leave home, for example, expat, but also those who didn't have the choice and had to leave home. We want to feature those who cannot go home for many reasons, social, political, identitary, and those who don't have a home because they chose not to or because it was taken from them. And then we want to feature people that can conjure home spiritually, physically, people that actually rule home or help us build it. Somebody like Francesca. So it's a universe, it's an ecosystem of stories that creates a diversity in the perspective, and also the personal story being the equalizer of all of this, different human experiences. So the first 2 episodes, you can find them now on the platform. I'm just gonna tell you a little bit of how we started off. We started off with language, which is such a primordial tool for building your own identity. And in particularly, we explore bilingualism because it's the challenge and the opportunity for bilinguals, which are the majority of the world, is to live in a world that's built for monolinguals in every aspect, political, social, design, et cetera, et cetera. And we explore this with the neurolinguist, Dr. Alicia Luque, who's also an immigrant, an expert, and a queer. And then in the second episodes, you can find the story of Italian writer and activist Esperanza Cozzimana Ripanti, who is of African descent. And she fled the genocide in Rwanda and was adopted in the north of Italy. And her experience of unbelonging is about the story that she still doesn't know about herself and how she conceives return or not returning to her motherland through her writing. Deep thinking, we believe that the way we produce content or create stories has to be reflective of the journey. Transformation is long, returning takes a long time. So we are more on the long form writing, content, and experience design. Sorry, if anybody can mute because I'm hearing a lot of noise. I don't know if there's anybody. Yeah, thank you. Intimacy is very important. Of course, there's social media nowadays, but we are aiming to build a community in more private spaces. And the way we are starting to do this is through our newsletter, the Atlas, which is out monthly with each and every one of the episodes. Here we feature additional resources for learning. It's called the Library of Transit, but we can also find private channels of discussions if you become a subscriber. So you could either sign up and follow our journey, or you can either become a member and subscribe and help us create this platform and become a donor and a supporter. So the lifelong learning is resources and workshops. We started workshops before the pandemic. We started workshops that would help people in transit take their next good step towards what they wanted to get. We truly believe in the life person connection. So we didn't do it in a digital form so far. We are planning to reboot these workshops, again, with the help of the community and the support, of course. Last but not least, this is a project that I've not done alone. At the moment, the project is self-funded, and it's relying a lot on the collaboration and the passion of a collective of in-betweeners, together with our producer, Claire McDonald's, who is also somebody that I met in New York, found in Italy when we both returned here, both leaving a job, both wanting to produce something meaningful for the community. All of us are coming from the same space. All of us are coming from a space of in-betweenness, either multiculturalism or returning home or being displaced. So it's kind of the empathy stays in the community, and there's a lot of iteration of ideas of return that comes from our collective, of our team as well. Some of them conceive it as something that has to do with your personal identity. Some of them consider it as a revolution. Some of them consider it as, you know, a way to protect your family. Some of them consider it something that has to do with change. So all of us and the story of our collective, our community, and our guests are all connected in exploring this idea that a return is not the end, but is the constant redesign of staying, and that ultimately learning to design a return or your return is not about learning to go back to square one or point zero, but it actually is having the tools and the community and the empathy and the stories to learning to go back to yourself as your home and to the home that you build within yourself at any time. And so our belief is that home is not only a space, it is a place. So we want to keep exploring it as such, as something that if you close your eyes is inside you. If you want to become part of this community, if you think that this work is interesting and you want to support us, you can subscribe at theatlassubtext.com as for our newsletter. Again, you can just sign up and receive our monthly newsletter, or you can become a subscriber and a member and support the project and the work that we're doing. You will become an actual donor and support everything, and including us doing more exclusive content, more workshop, and more experiences in the future. You can follow us on Instagram at The Design of Return, or listen to The Design of Return everywhere you listen to podcasts. We will provide you the link, so it's easy. Or if you have any ideas or want to share your story or want to connect personally, want to be involved, you can email us at thedesignofreturn@gmail.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Donatella, and thank you again, Francesca. So we've got some questions for both of you. First one is more like an observation about the concept of the integration that you mentioned before, which sounds like multi-potentialite in a different way. I don't know if you agree or if you have something to add to this observation.
I think it's the first time I've heard multi-potentialite, which is a word I love a lot. I think I've heard of, we talk a lot about multi-hyphenate. We talk a lot about multiverses, multi-power. So for sure, it is something that we really connect with. In particular, you know, like it's funny because we were talking about this the other day, how the word power has such a different meaning in Italian than it does in English. Like power in Italian, you also translated with potere, and potere has a lot to do with possibilities. So with potential and potentiality is definitely a territory that we like to explore very much. So thank you for this observation.
So this is a nice point in my opinion, and I think it can be interesting for the both of you, because the reflection here is about the cities, so the actual places or spaces, in this case, where where nomads lives, in this case digital nomads. We learned in this year that sometimes it's easier than you thought to become a digital nomad when you can dematerialize your work. So maybe this phenomenon has been more easier to observe in this last period. So I don't know what you think about it, both, I mean, from an architectural design point of view and also life designing point of view.
For sure. I think I can answer on both aspects. So I'm also involved in working with foundations, for example, to redesign experiences for neighborhoods. And what I've been noticing for the community, like the in-betweeners community, being them expat or immigrants, they're the ones that are like not listened to very often in a very profound way before designing a service. So it's important for me. It's very generative to think about how can we transform the city for who's using them as a digital nomad or as a nomad in general, because it is important to redesign the way we listen to this community before actually designing the space, before actually designing the service. So it's very interesting to start from that perspective. So it's very relevant, I agree, especially because we're also not talking about cities at scale. Maybe we're talking about services, maybe we're talking about neighborhoods, maybe we're talking about smaller scale, but it's definitely very, very generative. And there's a lot of people that hear that frustration in these communities in terms of like how the city space are designed, but there's also a lot of work that's been done in like how to listen to them better. So it's definitely very relevant.
And what about Francesca? Any ideas about shaping a house in a way that can accommodate the nomads too? I mean, you know, for example, having somewhere in the house already designed to be, I don't know, a place where someone can stay for a while and go. I don't know, ideas.
Well, for sure. I mean, it belongs. The needs are quite the same from cities and also small places, as Donatella was saying. Integration and inclusion, and the fact that we can use spaces in a more flexible way is something that is happening already. And also, due to the pandemic, we have seen that we are trying to use much more of the city than we did before. So for restaurants and bars, they are all finally using the paving to be there because of the pandemic, but also because it's our own rights to use the streets and not to leave it only to the cars that have been having the main they've been the main factor, and so as well as it's happening in the cities so that can be more livable, we can see the same happening to the private space. The private space needs to be smaller, multifunctional. They need to gain privacy to all the people that lives in there. So we need to have separation as well as places where we can be together. And this is more and more important, as well as having also green spaces. So I believe everybody is in this specific crisis time is looking at the house in a very in a more emotional way as well. And this is something very positive, and I think is also making the change on the way we design as well. So I'm really positive for the future of that.
Thank you. So next, it comes from Francesca. She asks for a story about an episode about someone who you actually helped return. But then I would add the next question, which is this one. Hi, dog. Ciao. Which is this one. So, are in-betweeners actually looking for a return? So, what about helping someone to return and then discovering what is in their head in their mind when they think about returning? Because maybe that can be a lot of different experiences under this flag of return.
Yeah, these are actually very, very good questions. So I would say our in-betweeners actually looking for a return. I think a lot of the time they feel like they should. And this is probably the biggest enemy, is to fight expectations. So when we talked about the either or, is that, right? So it's like, I'm actually an in-betweener. Should I pose somewhere? Should I build a home? Should I not? Probably a lot of people realize that it's okay not to, and actually it's their power that they have. That is an extra power towards people that actually don't want to do this work, is to realize that unbelonging can actually be a power. So yes, so there's that. That's probably the first obstacle, is always to realize that it's either self-imposed or society imposed that you should ask for a return. And so most of the stories are like, how do you deal with that expectation, right? And most of the stories end up with like freedom, because they realize they don't have to deal with that expectation, right? So there's that. In terms of, was the question about the person that I helped return, or that me return?
Yeah, an example that of someone who you helped in return.
Yeah. So I don't know, talking about, for example, this idea that belonging is very connected to work. A lot of the people that passed through the workshops that we did, for example, have had a new profession in mind. And a new profession in mind was, for example, this girl who was coming from a very similar background from mine, communication and PR and advertising and like marketing work. And she spent probably 3/4 of the workshop working on the idea of changing place where to go work. Like instead of like changing the way she was approaching work, she was like, I'm going to move from a company to an agency. I'm going to move to a company to an agency, just like keep looking for a space where to change. And at the end of the workshop, in the last 3 minutes, she realized that all she wanted to do was to be a travel agent. And like, she completely changed her life. And since then, she built her own company to start her own travel agency and whatever. But again, she spent most of the time trying to fit in, most of the time trying to have the linear path. And at the end, she just remembers that what she wanted to return to what she actually wanted. And it happens a lot of the time because it's when you liberate yourself from that shield, when you liberate from the square and build a diagonal, like Francesca was saying, like when you build that skill for lateral thinking, that's when you start to see the truth. And when return makes sense to you, because you're actually returning to something you can really connect with, rather than trying to go somewhere that doesn't fit with your life. So that was just an example, like very day-to-day professional life example, but I think it's kind of like a symbol of how this type of journey usually works.
Great. So last comment, it's just a thank you. That is also what I want
to so much.
say to the both of you. But I have my question now, because I also had a couple of things. So one is specifically for Francesca, because so the guys who are listening to us, who are watching us right now, they don't know it. But when we were talking about this talk, I was struggling a bit with the definition and the job definition, especially. So the job titles, to be precise. And I know that in this case, it's seems much more easier to define Francesca job, and the job that Donatella is carrying on seems to be a bit more difficult to define in a traditional way. but I also saw the thing that Francesca is struggling herself with this definition. Also because every definition is a box, as we keep repeating in this during this talk. So what's your relationship with this kind of definition? So with this kind of box, because I can see you don't feel yourself all inside the box, but there is something more.
Well, for sure, this connects also to what Donatella was doing and was saying. That was we think we need to return, but maybe we just have to let it go and don't feel settled, and this is fine. As well as for me, at the moment, well, I've been always struggling because I was an architect and a graphic designer, and this was a struggle because there was no role models for me that was doing the same thing, and it's still not there. So you are sort of creating something that is not there, and you're not sure if it's right or wrong. And this is something that belonged to my profession. But I can say to you that also recently, because I've been not only concentrating on my own research that you've seen today, that is about searching for the beauty, for uniqueness, for making people feeling comfortable in their house, but is also very much directed to something I do with a team that is the work I do as Rebel Architette work. That is something I don't do by myself. And so I must say that in this specific moment, I find it more productive to be an agent of change, like Donatella was saying, together with other people that just pushing my own research. This I found less interesting for myself. And I found it more important to really try to provoke some changes into the world that is really going through some needed change. And for instance, when I started doing this battle, I started because of a language reason, only because I wanted to move caused a lot of
Francesca, sorry, we lost you for a moment. So if you can repeat the last...
Yes. I was saying that also this kind of work that I do as a team started for a reason that is connected with language. And it was because we pushed forward the word architetta, that means only woman architect in Italy. But the debate that is causing makes me thinking that it's more important to fight for this right to be female and creatives than to work for my own research over beauty in houses and buildings. So this is something I can say and so this is why I cannot call myself only an activist or an architect or a designer, and hopefully I will find also a way that can describe me, or maybe I don't need it really. So this is what I can say for my side.
Well, on my end, well, it's been the battle of a lifetime. What I call like the tyranny of the job title. I think I was an executive for 12 years, and I've secretly been an artist, not showing anything and anyone my work, my videos, my photos, my writing. I was like a closeted creator. I was trying to just express myself through my work. And again, comes from the same conviction that if you don't have something that you're extremely specialized in, that the world can name you for, that can brand you for, then you're not going to have success. You're not going to survive. Like, it gets to a point in which you're personally affected. Like your life is affected by it. It's very dramatic. And then when I went on my sabbatical, I basically opened the Pandora vase and I was like, all right, now I'm going to try every possible identity that I can. And it was like identity gym, I was like, I'm going to be a designer 1 month and a poet another. And then it was like, whatever. And I enjoyed it so much. Then I had to come back to the real world. And I spent a year and a half fighting to find a job title that could first describe me for the world outside there. And people were convincing me to use personal branding over personal story every time. And I found this job title that I invented, which was a creativity hacker, whatever, which is still on my LinkedIn. And again, a year after, it doesn't satisfy me anymore because my work has evolved again. So it just like never stops, really. And I think of my work, my life, and everything as, you know, the textured pavement that Francesca was created for the house. You know, like you can find the same texture here, and then you go in the corner of the bathroom, you find the same texture. So first comes the purpose, and then from that purpose comes the story. From that stories comes the work. It's not the other way around. And then, of course, I'm giving up on things. You know, every time I send a curriculum for a very specialized job, I'm usually not called up because I have too many experiences that don't make sense with each other, you know, and I have to carefully select to be called. But then I have to decide, do I want to be called, or do I want to be chosen, or do I want to choose, you know? So it's like, it depends on how you want to be in the world. Of course, it is about doing sacrifices if you decide to be a multi-hyphenate, because not everybody will understand the type of journey you're in. But the moment there's somebody that can understand that the connection is fruitful, generative, valuable, and impactful for both parts. So it's about, you know, going on with your why first, not with your brand. So for me, the why is, I want to help you find a place to call home. I know that belonging is my why, whatever that shape takes. And then it comes why this is my why, it's my story. And then comes the job title. And I can have 5 different specialization. I'm actually have like 3 certification. I'm an expert on one field, and then I've added another. Like, does it even make sense? I have like 25 certification. Does it even make sense to talk about them all? Like, it's a toolbox, you know, but the point is the purpose and why you're doing the work, and then becoming very specialized in different tools, adding those tools to your toolbox, and then go and look for who can understand that type of conversation. I think that's what I understood from my own path, and the sacrifices and the door shuttered in my face that I got. But again, I think the value is invaluable of what you get out of this mindset. So requires patience, but it can pay off.
Okay, I would say that also our community has had a lot of patience, because we are here. We've been here from 1 hour and a half. So I would have some more questions to ask you, but maybe we can find another way, another time to go deeper into these concepts, if the both of you want it. So for now, I'm thanking everyone. I'm also thanking Valentina from the Bologna community, who had to go away. So she's here anyway. The community of Bologna is here anyway with us. So if you want to contact us to ask us anything about collaboration, about ideas, about any kind of feedback, you can find us on these channels, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on the email. If you go to Creative Mornings website, you can also subscribe to Creative Mornings Milan newsletter, so not just the international one, but the local one. And open your email when the newsletter comes, because you will find also other links and other information about our next events. As far as Francesca Perani, we can find her on their official website, on Instagram, on Facebook, also on LinkedIn. And I was really interested in finding new information about the project Rebel Architette, so I decided to add this here too. But of course, with her name, you can find her like everywhere. Same goes from Donatella Caggiano. We have you can find the design of return also just by typing the name on Spotify or on Google. the Atlas newsletter, the Instagram channel, and I forgot to. I was so interested in the rebel architect, I forgot it here.
Can I be a rebel architect?
Of course.
I would love to be.
Of course you can. You have to.
I love self-appointed.
Okay. So again, thank you everyone. You will find the recording of this event in a couple of days on this channel and on Creative Mornings website. Thank you again to our speaker, to our sponsor. You will get also further information about how Softfits will sponsor us and the community. And see you next time. Have a nice evening. Have a nice week. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.